Hello and welcome to another Airheads webinar. Today we'll hear from our experts at Zerto and HPE Aruba Networking in Your Network, First Defense Against Ransomware. But before they get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and the replay will be available on our Airheads community for logged in members. If you're not already a member of the community, you can join for free. I'll drop that link in the chat. Just click Become a Member in the upper right and answer the questions. Okay, pop that in the chat. You should see that now. Next, for those who have access to the Q&A tab, please put your questions there. We have our experts standing by to answer your questions, and that's where they will primarily be looking. We understand that there may be some of you who don't have access to a Q&A tab, and if that's you, go ahead and put your question in the chat, but understand that it may take us a little longer to find and respond to your question. So again, if you have access to the Q&A tab, please use that. And with that, I will hand it over to Eve Marie to get us started.
Great, thank you, Stephanie, and thanks today for everyone for joining. Today we're covering ransomware and how you can use your network as the first defense against this sort of attack, along with HPE Zerto. And just to share with you our agenda for today, we're going to start by talking about ransomware and more specifically about the hacking lifecycle so that you can understand what the anatomy of a ransomware attack looks like and how the network can be your first line of defense. We also understand that not everybody may be familiar with HPE Zerto, so we're going to talk a little bit about the continuous data protection that the HPE Zerto solution offers and how HPE Aruba Networking Central can work with Zerto to provide you comprehensive layered defense against ransomware attacks. Then we're going to show you those integrations in action. So we have a couple of folks from several different teams who are joining us today. We have Anthony Dutra from the HPE Zerto team, as well as Tejas Aram and Nirmal Rajarathnam from HPE Aruba Networking, who are going to be providing you with the demo for today and answering many of your questions. My name is Eve Marie Lanza, and I represent our HPE Aruba Networking Security Solutions. Now, before we get started, we just kind of want to understand from your perspective, what are you experiencing around ransomware? And Stephanie, can you help us? I think we have a poll that we wanted to launch to better understand what folks are observing when it comes to ransomware.
You should see that poll. If a window didn't pop up in your browser, then you may want to look into your chat window. Give everybody just a couple minutes or just a couple more seconds. And you should see the responses now.
So I actually cannot see them from my view. Would you be open to providing a quick summary of what our folks are seeing?
Absolutely. 3% say yes daily, 7% say yes weekly, 3% say yes monthly, 25% say yes sporadically, 39% say no, and 24% say not sure.
Got it. Got it. So it sounds like for most people, they are unfortunately encountering ransomware, at least on an occasional basis. So we do understand that this is a very current concern that a lot of organizations are facing. And this reflects a lot of what the research is showing us as well. So from some research that just came out last year, we're seeing that active ransomware groups have increased by 56%. So that means there are a lot more attackers that are showing up out there and are soon targeting organizations, and a lot more folks to contend with, a lot more bad actors to contend with. This is also reflected in the number of organizations on average that are experiencing ransomware attacks. Zerto, along with the Enterprise Strategy Group in 2023, collaborated on some research, and that research revealed that 75% of organizations experienced ransomware attacks in the last 12 months. So it's more likely than not that an organization is going to experience a ransomware attack over the course of a year. So it makes sense to be prepared. And what are the consequences of a ransomware attack? Besides the disruption to business, the potential reputational harm that can stem from that, any potential ransom that is paid in order to unlock the data that's been maliciously encrypted by the ransomware attacker. Ransomware attacks can cost an organization almost $3 million in recovery costs. So these are attacks that have significant impacts, and it makes sense to think about how can you defend your organization against ransomware, and how can you use a couple of different layers of defense. You'll also note, as I mentioned, we have a couple of different speakers today. So to help orient to who's sharing information with you, you'll see the speaker's name up at the top right-hand corner. And so to kind of level set and help you understand a little bit more about the anatomy of a ransomware attack, Anthony, can you share with us, what does a ransomware attack look like?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Marie. Thank you, everybody, for joining. There is a lot of, and I'm glad we're talking about layers in general when it comes to protection, but even when it comes to things like a ransomware attack, a malware attack, or even just the cyber attack in general, there's a lot of different layers to it. Now, it's interesting that I see no, not a lot, like maybe like 40% or so on here are saying that, hey, we don't really experience a problem with ransomware. And it's mainly due to the fact that most likely not yet, right? Ransomware doesn't just come up, hit you in the face with one giant punch and lock everything that is in your system. It takes time. The first thing that we typically tend to see so I'm on the Zerto side when we're doing data protection, and a lot of our customers, when they recover from these attacks, is that ransomware has been sitting in their systems for a while. This is usually gained entry through a phishing attack by, some obviously malicious third party, and they just get into the systems maybe with some access keys that give them basic level of information to get in. As they maybe deploy some, malware or tracking inside of the areas themselves, they start to weaponize each portion of your data center in itself. So maybe it's collecting data and figuring out, well, which tier of data is more important than this other one, and how do we maybe interact with it in such a way that is going to, cause the most, significant damage at the end of the day. So you recon, then weaponize the data and the tools you're going to use in itself, and then it becomes the delivery of the ransomware in itself. So what you'll typically tend to see is encryption is the biggest method of those locking the, the majority of the things that we deal with our virtual machines up. So locking the files within those file servers, not, denying access to things. And that is when you get an email, a notification that, hey, you have been attacked. You must pay us, usually in cryptocurrency, this amount of money to unlock your data. One statistic that we found, and we talk a lot about on the Zerto side as well, is even though most organizations do pay the ransom itself, only 4% usually get their data back at the end of the day. And that's if they already haven't exploited it in some other way during the weaponization phase earlier on. So, your data is locked. You have the choice to pay the ransom. Is it going to turn out well if you do? Maybe not. Statistically, not so much. And now they have basically installed themselves and have, and now taking complete command and control of your full environment. So, since you're not acting on paying the ransom itself, can we, be deleting certain files within this organization, this part of your IT infrastructure and causing havoc there? They're going to embed themselves within your virtual environment or your IT infrastructure until something happens, until you either give in completely on their actions and objectives, and sort of move forward from there. So there is a lot of different. Again, it's not necessarily brute force where a lot of these attacks are happening. You need to be sure that from the get-go, you are leveraging detection and being proactive in terms of, having that detection itself, but also protection in order to basically combat all layers of this potential harm of the cyber attack in general. So I hope that was, that was a lot, but I think that covered pretty much it. And really, from the Zerto perspective, and what I love about this slide is how we've been combating this exact approach from the virtual layer. So if you are not familiar with Zerto in itself, Zerto is a software-only hypervisor-based replication technology. So we only operate at the hypervisor layer, and it doesn't matter what the underlying storage infrastructure is. We interact directly with the Zerto Virtual Manager, and from there, we deploy what are called VRAs at each of the sites, and they do the replication between each side to provide that CDP that gets delivered. So when you group your virtual machines into virtual protection groups with Zerto, you are able to quickly restore them all together in seconds because we use a journal to checkpoint all the delta changes that are happening within that group of virtual machines. And you also, you basically rewind back like a DVR to a very specific point in time, seconds before something had happened. So why is this important in the terms of ransomware and what we discussed before? Your data is locked up. Well, I just rolled back 5 seconds before that problem happened, and I'm back online and running before I potentially click that bad button or click that bad email or something along those lines. And all of this in terms of a failover is orchestrated and automated for you. So when you click the failover button, the big red button, Zerto is taking down the virtual machine, if you choose so, at the primary site and bringing back up an instance that is clean that you choose at the DR site. It is able to detect inline that encryption rate happening very, very high. So it'll also tag those checkpoints to say, hey, these look weird. Don't roll back here. All of that is automated for you. So when you click the button, everything can happen. And then we also do non-disruptive testing. So the failovers themselves, you don't necessarily have to do a full-on failover to the other site. You can do a test failover to the other site, and it'll literally bring up that virtual machine or those groups of virtual machines to the specific point in time that you've designated and say, give it a tag of testing recovery. So it'll literally be in that state, but not interrupting your production environment running normally today. So that's how basically Zerto from end to end provides data protection and what it is at a high level for your infrastructure in terms of how it protects. Next slide. And that's what we'll absolutely see in this demo. So you all are already big Aruba airheads. You understand networking definitely from the intricacies in terms of Zero Trust. What we'll be demoing in the Aruba Networking Central dashboard will be very familiar to you. But when you look at Zerto, what you'll be seeing through our GUI is that continuous data protection, how we will be getting the alerts from Aruba Central and what those alerts look like and what our sort of failover and failback mechanisms look like as well. Anybody?
Okay. Tejas, are you ready to start the demo?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, great.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
We sure can. Thank you.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Edit session. I'll start the demo now. So traditionally, VPNs pose a major security risk. So once authenticated, user gain access to the entire network, making it prime target for cyber attacks. If the credentials are compromised, attackers can move laterally and exploit the entire network. Now, this is where our HPE Aruba Networking's SSE or Secure Service Edge comes in. With Zerto, with zero trust network access, administrators can define policies that can restrict access based on identity or location. So instead of exposing the whole network, users only see access applications they are authorized for, so significantly reducing network exposure. Now, for example, as you can see, I am, as a user, having access to only the ransomware demo setup, which consists of AP, gateway, client, and a server. So apart from this, I'm not able to access any other systems in the network. Additionally, if any unauthorized access is detected, it can be locked down and immediately blocked. So adding another layer of protection. Nirmal, do you want to add anything on top of this?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Tejas. I just want to touch on what Anthony was talking about as well. So what Tejas is going to be demonstrating is the initial part. If you remember the attack, the anatomy of the attack or ransomware, it starts from reconnaissance. So what Tejas is going to be demonstrating is that initial part of how somebody could potentially enter the network, and that's where what he talked about as a VPN as a critical point is because if you have VPN credentials, there are so many ways people fish that information from a good, proper employee who has the right credentials. They fish that information from them and they can get into the network. Now, the difference between what Tej is talking about versus VPN is once you fish that credential and enter the network, the whole network is open to you, which means you can move from any device to any device at your own will based on the credentials that has been provided. And typically VPN is not segmented. Once you get into the network, the whole network is open. Whereas with this approach, because you're locking it down to only the specific servers or specific devices or specific items, which is part of the zero trust tenets itself, is to validate authentication at the time of entry and only restrict to the absolutely needed set of things. We are already starting with that zero trust aspect of it from the get-go of getting into the network itself.
Perfect. Thank you, Nirmal. So let me start with the client laptop. Now, let's say our client clicks on certain link through a suspicious email, which might lead us to a malicious or a compromised website. Here, ppift.net is used to trigger a malicious activity. So let's say I keep on refreshing this for certain time. Now what happens is IPS or intrusion prevention system um, mode where traffic is actively blocked from passing through if it is deemed as malicious. So it adds a second layer of defense. Even when a threat bypasses other controls, like when it enters via email, which may not be directly monitored by the network, IPS still plays a key role. Once the email is received and an unsuspecting user clicks on the malicious email, the IPS system immediately detects the malware and prevents it from causing the further damage. However, if user remains unaware and continues interacting with the threat, IPS doesn't just stop there. It can still gather valuable information and help prevent future incident. This additional layer of insight enables us to take further actions and to minimize any potential damage and enhance overall protection. So let me now go to Central.
So Tejas, if I may just add a little more context
Yeah,
to
sure.
what you were
Yeah,
showing.
sure. Nirmal.
So what you saw there, just to give you a little more context about the demo itself, what you saw there is a situation where the user is receiving some link either through email or SMS or voicemail or whatever the case may be, and that link takes them to this site. And as you can imagine, when you go to the site, as Tejas was talking about, there's a layer of defense added which can be done in multiple modes. One is intrusion detection, which is it'll just alert only and not intrude with the user's experience itself. But it'll just alert and let the administrator know that something potentially bad could be happening, because not everything is need to be bad. It can be a potential bad item as well. Then the second mode is the intrusion prevention mode. That's what Tejas was talking about. So in this particular case, what is happening is because the intrusion detection and prevention system identified this as a potential threat, as something that could be a command and control in this particular case, it is blocking that. But the user not aware of the fact that it's blocking, and if he's seeing, cannot reach the site, he continues to click, which is the typical thing that would happen with any user when you're not able to see a intended outcome. So you're going to continue to try to reach that point. So that's what is happening. So he is simulating that aspect of it where the user tries to keep on trying that. And what this does is it creates a signal, or it creates a threshold to reach to the next stage, which is what Tejas is going to be demonstrating right now.
Thank you, Nirmal. So let's go to our Black Hat demo group. Let's go to security. Under Gateway IDS IPS tab, let's see the summary first. Okay, here we can see different types of threats being detected. Right now, we have only one type of threat, that's DNS threat. We can also see different types of trends. Since we have only one kind of threat, we can see a percentage change in that kind of threat. So there's a 42% decrease in DNS threat. Most affected hosts, since we have only one host for this demo, that can be seen here, but you can see multiple hosts depending on different threats. And on top of that, you can see top hosts as well. So this is a summary page. I can also take you to list, where you see a list view of the threats. And if you go in, you can see details of what kind of threat it is. The signature shows Windows 32, PIFT DNS, the protocol, the category, severity, what kind of alert this is. It's the command and control pattern observed. And it also shows a description of what kind of threat that has been detected. Now, let me take you to the configuration part. Now, under the General tab, we see that we have enabled traffic inspection. Our mode is IDS, and fail strategy is bypass. You can see here that latest rule set package has been downloaded, like that. That's the 14th Feb 2025 package, and it will automatically update every day at this time. Let me take you to the policies part now. Now we have different types of policies, but here we have selected IDS strict policy. Now, if we click on IDS strict, we see more of signatures and categories. Now, let me show you different categories such as scan, malware, exploit, attack and response. And these are the different signatures related to these categories. We can also see signatures related to something specific like VMware maybe. So all these are threats related to VMware. Now, I want to highlight a key point like Eve Marie and Anthony discussed about kill chain. We can identify threats at every stage from reconnaissance to the final attack. As mentioned, some of these activities like reconnaissance, that is scanning, attackers look for open ports, vulnerable applications, or operating systems. Using our IDS and IPS threat intelligence, we can monitor all these stages. In this scenario, we were focusing on VMware, where protection is critical at the hypervisor level. Attackers often target data or what you call the treasure chest, as Nirmal said, which includes your IP, sensitive information, and customer data. So this is highly valuable in the black market. Once One significant trend shift is that attackers are no longer lingering in the system for months. Instead, now they go straight to the data, knowing that the security systems are more vigilant. Time is of the essence, so rapid detection and response are crucial. And that's what we are demonstrating today. Now I'll take you to
Just to
alerts.
add what sorry Tejas,
Yeah, yeah.
just to add to what Tejas said about, especially about the dwell time, which is people don't linger. There is that's a huge shift in the way ransomware attacks happen. In earlier days, probably as early as the early mid 90s, they used to be in the network for 30 to 60 days or even longer, until they figure out and do the lateral movement to reach the the treasure chest, or the most important critical place, which is the data itself. That's where they try to go towards. Now it has reduced, as of the reports as of earlier this year, the dwell time has reduced to about 4.5 hours. So imagine how quickly the security folks have to react in order to take care of that. From 90 days, it has gone down to 4.5 hours. So from the time something bad has started happening, you literally have 4.5 hours to react and make sure that your most important assets are protected. So that's very critical, which is why, if you saw that, what Tejas was pointing out, we start all the way from the beginning, which is reconnaissance, as in scanning, somebody scanning to see if any ports are open first. And then they go and do research about the company and all kind of stuff before they reach that, the attack or exploit or malware or even command and control, before they go towards the attack response stage. So there are 5 to 6 different stages. We start looking at all the way from the first stage onwards, and we start giving information as different stages occur. And one more key point to point out here is we look at all directions of attack. So this is critical to know. Most systems only do north south, meaning something leaving the network or coming into the network. What we do in our gateway is we actually look at east-west traffic, which is within the VLAN, even intra VLAN, inside the VLAN, when one device is talking to another device connected to the same exact access point, same exact gateway, we can still investigate or inspect that and identify threats as well. So that is a key differentiator. And the second point to add is, it is not simply based on the signature, meaning looking at the pattern, looking at this information in the packet itself, but it's also looking at the pattern of usage, meaning, stage one, you received an email, stage two, you clicked on the link. We actually look at the pattern of usage and see if they're going towards a bad trend or a good trend. So we look at all of these things as well, not just simply that. From an installation and deployment standpoint, we support this functionality in all 9,000 gateways with security licenses, whether it is deployed as a VPNC or as a mobility gateway or as a branch gateway. Please go ahead, Tejas.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me take you to global alerts and events and show you how we have configured these alerts. So in the configuration, we have configured these alerts for gateway. We have configured it under gateway thread count per signature. Now, as you can see under rule 1, we have selected the severity as critical, and we have mentioned that if the count of these alerts exceeds 5 within 5 minutes, and the device belongs to this particular group and this particular site, send us a notification in the form of email. You can set default recipients or you can set other recipients. You can select n number of recipients here. And the other type of notification we are sending out is a webhook. This is a webhook we have configured. Let me show you where to configure a webhook. Under organization, we go to platform integration and we see a webhook here. Yeah. Nirmal, you want to talk more about webhook?
Yeah, let me talk about the webhook part. So, as Anthony talked about, Zerto comes into play at the hypervisor level layer when after something bad has happened. So they need to be informed, or Zerto needs to be informed that something bad is happening. So we are talking about all the initial layers, all the way from the VPN part, or somebody entering the network, somebody scanning for IP addresses or open ports, somebody looking for the emails, clicks and things of that nature, all the way up to the last part, which is the attack or command and control or installation, and so forth, and so on and so forth, which I think Eve Marie will summarize towards the end after this demo. But the critical point about this is, in this scenario, Aruba network, which comes in as the network layer of defense, is actually acting as a sensor, which is, it's once it's receiving all these bad stuff that's happening, it's gathering all those valuable information, as Tejas talked about earlier, for every single click or every single alert that is happening, and creates a threshold or reaches a threshold. Once it reaches a threshold of certain number of things, bad things happening, then it triggers the webhook. So this sensing information is now propagated to other systems. It could be, Zerto, it could be ServiceNow, it could be Splunk. In this particular example, what we're trying to showcase is, as people are moving towards the treasure chest, which is the data, I have to be notified and I want to be able to take actions. That's the intent behind this particular demonstration. So what the webhook that acts as a sensor that is gathering this information from this Aruba network system and sending that information, all the bad information, to the system that's going to act on it. In this particular case, Zerto, which is the backup recovery system. It's informing Zerto saying that, hey, something bad is happening. Somebody is trying to reach the VMware because of somebody trying to click on a link, which happens to expose that and get you to a lateral movement, which can lead you to that to your treasure chest, in this case the VMware server, where the backup and recovery system is actually running. So when that sensing information is reached to Zerto, Zerto will take an action. This webhook is a method or means of sending that in bad data, or the payload of this bad data, to Zerto for them to know the context where the bad things are happening from and potentially take a proper action. On the Zerto side, they have multiple layers there as well. In this particular example about the checkpoint that Anthony talked about, it is more about preventing the post breach situation, meaning if something bad had happened, how do I recover from that? We'll also talk, as part of the summary, we'll talk about what other methods of protection can be applied on Zerto as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nirmal. So going back to our client, we know that now we have triggered an alert. Now, let me go and log into Zerto. Okay, I'll go to VPG and I'll click on Black Hat VPG. So it will take some time to see the manually tag checkpoint, but I had this performed 1 hour back, and you can see that we have insertion of manual tag checkpoint alert coming through the webhook. Now, what is VPG? VPG is a feature within Zerto's disaster recovery software platform that groups together virtual machines for data protection and replication purposes. Now, let me take you to the failure part. Let me click next. You can see at this point, there's a checkpoint. If I click on edit, these are multiple checkpoints taken within few seconds of each other. You can see that there's a threat event for user ID with this exceeding the threshold 5 in last 5 minutes, which we had configured on the gateway. Now, typically in ransomware attack, the attacker exfiltrates the data and holds it hostage. It can bulk encrypt the data and say, pay me like millions of dollars before you can get access to your data. However, here with Aruba, we were able to send an alert to the users through email and to Zerto through webhook for the malicious activity it noticed, and Zerto created a checkpoint, which is tagged at a point in time where compromise is potentially happening, and I can revert back to a point just a few seconds before. So I can click here, I can click OK, and I can click next, and I can basically fail over at this point. So I can revert back to a point just few seconds before malicious activity happened, and we are good to go. So this is a failure or post-breach recovery scenario here. This is one of the use case of Zerto. Zerto can also protect against bulk data upload and mass encryption of unauthorized user. Maybe Anthony can talk more about it.
And
Anthony, do
Anthony,
you
while
have
you
anything
touch
to
up,
add? Yeah, go ahead,
while
Nirmal.
you talk about it, Anthony, there is a question which might be relevant as well. So I'll state the question. So when you respond, you can talk about it, and I'll cover my portion. How can the traffic between VM be intercepted since they go without leaving the host itself? Is the question. So if you can talk about from the Zerto side, I'll talk from the networking side as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that'll clarify it, and don't everybody forget, I'm gonna hijack it for a second, is how Zerto replicates the data itself. And I'll at least just say from our level, right? So again, we only operating at the hypervisor in itself. When you hook up Zerto meaning you install Zerto as an OVF. It sees everything within your vCenter itself. And then when you group the virtual machines into VPGs, you start replicating to whatever other site you want to replicate to. So we take from the hypervisor right, and we send that to the local memory buffer of the VRA. And again, the VRAs are just like those worker horses doing all the replication for Zerto in itself. From there, that is when we analyze the encryption rate of the block in real time as we're checking any of the delta changes happening within the block before we split it. So at that point, if everything looks good, or if it doesn't, right, we'll split the, copy and split the write itself, compress it, encrypt it, and send it near synchronously either over to a secondary site, locally, wherever you're replicating to that VRA, and that is tracked in the journal. So that is for those who are unfamiliar with Zerto in itself. What makes this more of a DR technology is the journal can keep track of everything from 1 hour all the way up to 30 days. So very fast in terms of, well, yeah, of recovery times, but there is a limitation to a number of days that, the Zerto journal can roll back that granular level to. And that's how we, in general, create the replica. So if something does happen here, then Zerto triggers that alert within the system itself, which we can show in a little bit, but we'll see that before anything is actually replicated, to the site and alert you while that's happening. So Nirmal, I don't know if you want to jump into how.
There's one more question, but let me answer this part, and then I'll let you answer the question. The question is, does Zerto work with Nutanix? So before you answer, let me talk. You want to say that? You want to finish answering that? I'll go back to the.
I'm sorry, super quick. No, just to make you.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So let me talk about the previous question about how we can inspect when traffic is flowing within the host itself. So, as I mentioned, IDS IPS in Aruba actually looks at east-west traffic as well. In most data centers, the traffic that is flowing within the host, that is in a host, if you have guest operating system running as virtual machines inside a host, they are considered east-west traffic. For example, if you ignore the the recovery system, backup recovery system, even in traditional three-tier applications, you have web layer, application layer, and data layer. In many cases, they run as VMs within the host. These intercommunication within the different components can be identified as well. The requirement is the traffic as they flow has to go through the gateway, or the gateway should be aware of this traffic flowing between the systems. And because we do look at it from the role perspective, role in the sense the client role perspective, and every traffic which is east-west, any IP to IP communication, any device to another device communication, whether it is within the VLAN, outside the VLAN, or any of those cases, we do inspect that information. On top of it, slightly digressing a little bit, which is outside of the demo scope, is the IDS IPS inspection. Part of this similar kind of inspection also happens on the CX switches. So if you're using a CX switch as a top of rack switch in the data center, that also provides a similar type of inspection. In fact, there is a CyberVault as a package that is sold as within HPE, which is a combination of switch plus the Zerto system, sold as a package together. That includes the switch that I'm talking about. I believe it is the CX10K switches, but this operation is going to be, or is already in, the CX 6300 switches as well. And in future, some of the intermediate switches will also have this functionality. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but basically the information is, we look at east-west traffic and north-south traffic, inter-host, intra-host, inter-VLAN, intra-VLAN. All those things are accounted for, so we can inspect and we will see this data flow and can identify bad stuff there as well.
Yes, awesome. Agreed. And then for just to show what our encryption thing looks like, I think to finish up my question as well. This is when again from the hypervisor layer, when Zerto sees the weird encryption activity happening, in just like the demo we've shown, it'll automatically in that VPG tag the suspicious point in time, the activity there, and then a clean checkpoint there. And now again, layer on HPE Aruba Central sending us that message is just another point in time to say, hey, do not roll back to, and just look at the granular points in time you can, as we've shown in real time. So powerful tools together for sure. It's crazy. Yeah, do we want to kick back to? I'm answering some questions in time as on the side as well. So thank you for people sending those in.
Can you guys see my screen again?
Yep.
Yeah, so here I had triggered another alert. It's just like 2 minutes back. When we go to VPG, Black Hat VPG, there's one checkpoint triggered. And when we go to failover, we go to test. Next. Yeah. From here, this is where the threat was detected, and we can select any other checkpoint below that, and we would be safe.
Yeah, just to
This
add
is
context here, I think Anthony touched on this as well.
Yeah.
This is the post breach case where, in case something bad has happened and somebody had, let's say, at this bad stage, somebody had started doing an encryption and doing a bulk encryption and throwing away the key or whatever the case may be, or started exfiltrating or whatever the case, whatever bad stuff that started happening, that indication, that information comes here because Aruba provided that, saying that, hey, something bad is happening, this threat event detected. That's the notification saying that this is when payload from Aruba came into Zerto and it took a checkpoint at this stage. So that gives an indication for the administrator, this backup recovery administrator, say, I need to go to a checkpoint that is prior to this, which is when everything was safe, because Zerto takes, checkpoints every second or so, and it also notifies or adds a comment saying that why it took that checkpoint. In this particular case, a threat event was detected by Aruba. That information came to Zerto, and that is why this checkpoint was taken. This is a good indication for the administrator to figure out which checkpoint they have to go back to or roll back to. Sorry, go ahead, Tejas.
Yeah, thank you, Nirmal. I'm done with the demo.
So back to you, Marie, then. So before
back
you,
to-
Marie, starts talking, as I mentioned, Zerto, this is only one aspect of Zerto. When you think about ransomware, the breach, this what we showed here is post breach. That is after that attack surface happened and it's reached beyond that stage where you have gone to the attack and attack response, where the bad guys have full control of your system, and they have started not only doing things in your network while they're sitting there, but also getting the data out of your network and doing bad stuff. So those kind of things are started happening, and that's what we call as a post breach. But Zerto can do protection prior to that as well. So for instance, it can identify unauthorized access when a normal stuff is actually being accessed versus something anomalous happening. They can identify that, and they can also identify this kind of an encryption with the wrong key or a different key or bad key, or the act of bulk encryption itself. So those are all indications that it is going through a ransomware attack. Even before you reach that breach situation, they can identify and take some of these other actions. We are not demonstrating all of that. I'm just indicating that there are other type of protection that can be done on the Zerto side also. Back to you, Marie.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. So, Tejas, if you want to discontinue sharing, I can share a couple of concluding thoughts.
Yep.
I know that was a really exciting demo to watch, very powerful because we were watching in real time how a threat could be detected and defended against across a couple of different systems. So I want to just quickly revisit to summarize what we saw in the context of what we learned earlier around the hacking lifecycle and the ransomware attack kill chain. So, we know that there are actions that malicious actors are taking, even sometimes before we observe that behavior. And so, with HPE Aruba Networking and Zerto, we were able to provide layered defense and protection against ransomware across all of those different stages of the hacking lifecycle. And I think sometimes when we think about ransomware, we sometimes tend to think about the late stages, what's really visible once that email demand is received or once files become inaccessible. But what we know about the hacking lifecycle and the ransomware attack kill chain is that there's a lot of work that the malicious actors are doing ahead of time. And so with this layered approach, we're able to observe and detect and protect against ransomware, even in its earliest stages. And sometimes another way of thinking about how we deliver or provide ransomware protection is to not just look at what the malicious actors are doing and what their actions are and how we defend against ransomware in all of those different uh, stages, but also thinking about what are we as organizations doing, what are organizations doing to mitigate risk. And one of the frameworks that organizations often use is that NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. And you can see here across all of the different actions and activities that an organization can do to mitigate risk from threats like ransomware, HPE Aruba Networking Security Solutions and Zerto have you covered. So you gain a very comprehensive set of ransomware protection capabilities with these solutions. We'll leave some time for Q&A, but I also want to let you know that we'll be following up with you to provide more information about the solutions and the integrations that you saw here today. So again, we know that most folks, many airheads may not be as familiar with Zerto, so we'll provide you a couple of links afterwards that you can use to learn more about the solution, as well as do a self-paced test drive of the security solution on your own to kind of experiment and play with. In addition, we have some resources that relate specifically to the ransomware protection capabilities that we provided an overview to today. We actually have an 8 to 9 minute demo that recaps what you saw today. So you can take a look at that and be able to dive in deeper into any of the particulars that may be of interest. So we'll provide that link to you. We also have a couple of blogs that outline the protection capabilities that you saw today and provide links to additional information that may be of interest. So with that, we'll open to any final Q&A. I'll again thank you to our very esteemed speakers. Thank you, Tejas, and Anthony for sharing the demo and providing that great information about how HPE Aruba Networking and Zerto can work together to provide that layered ransomware defense. And thank you, Nirmal, for answering questions in Q&A and bringing up a couple of key points that really brought home the very powerful capabilities that we saw today.
Yeah, thank you for a very powerful demonstration of how we connect the systems from networking to storage, in this case, backup and recovery. And there are some good questions. If you saw if you liked what you saw, that's great. But if you have additional feedback on how we could improve the solution, some of the questions came up pointing towards that as well, which thank you for those questions. But continue to reach us and give us your feedback on how we can further improve the solutions. There are additional integrations similar to this that we are working on. As we go towards that, we will continue to talk about it. But if you have other feedback, please let us know how we can make the solution even better.
Okay, well, thank you, Nirmal. Thank you, Eve Marie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found today's session valuable, and we would love to have your feedback. So I've dropped a link to a brief survey in the chat, and we'd appreciate it if you take a minute or two to fill that out. Also, keep an eye out for our next webinar, which will be posted on our Airheads community events page. I will put that link in the chat as well. But thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.